fishing vessel in waters west of the Galapagos. Its lights blaze to attract squid, and it is not alone. This is a Chinese armada, a vast fishing fleet that is responsible for a fifth of the world's seafood trade, food which ends up on your plate. But according to allegations made in an investigation by the Outlaw Ocean Project, an NGO, food that is produced in abusive conditions and that is sometimes the product of forced labor. The work on board is hard, the conditions are tough. They can also be abusive. This video and audio were gathered by the Outlaw Ocean Project, a non-profit journalism organization that reports on human rights and environmental crimes at sea, as part of a 4-year-long investigation shared with Sky News.
Basically, we were not given anything. We were restrained, caged, like in a prison. I felt the most difficult thing was not being able to contact my family. It felt so difficult not to speak to them, because the captain didn't allow us to access the Wi-Fi or make any calls.
For those poor and desperate enough, though, it seems like an opportunity, especially for villagers in Indonesia, who join not knowing what they'll be subjected to. One of those was Daniel Aritonang, who signed up when he was 18 years old. He handed over his passport and signed this contract. He'd be paid $3,000 a year. And along with the rest of the new hires, he got ready for his new life at sea. This was his boat, a Chinese-owned vessel called the Gen Far 7. On September the 2nd, 2019, they set sail. He spent the next 2 months voyaging from a port in South Korea to the rich fishing waters near the Galapagos. The work was demanding. The main shift was from 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. The foreman would punch and slap workers for mistakes. The food was meager, mainly instant noodles. In January 2021, after a year and a half continually at sea, Daniel fell ill with beriberi, a disease caused by a deficiency of vitamin B. It's often down to a deficient diet, and it can be easily treated, but it can also be fatal. A deckhand on board the Gen Far 7 at the same time watched what happened to Daniel.
The ones that got sick on board were Heri Kusmanto and Daniel. Daniel was all swollen, with his eyes turned yellow. By the time we got to Argentina, he was in a bad shape.
The captain refused to get medical attention for Daniel. There was more squid to catch, much more, and the Gen Far 7 sailed on. The ship had already travelled many thousands of miles, starting in Busan, South Korea, onwards to the Pacific, and from there down to Argentina. Finally, on March the 2nd, he was transferred to a fuel tanker, which took him to Montevideo in Uruguay. Daniel was admitted to hospital. Daniel's story is part of a 4-year investigation by the Outlaw Ocean Project. They spent months on the water, shadowing China's fishing fleet in waters of the Atlantic and the Pacific to the seas around North Korea. They interviewed crew over radio.
Just preparing messages for the crew on the fishing vessels?
And by messages in bottles, writing survey questions on paper, making them watertight, then pursuing vessels and throwing them aboard. And picking up any replies filled in by the crew. In some cases, they managed to board boats themselves and speak to crew directly. 2 Chinese workers begged the team to help them leave and asked them to contact their embassy. In all, they documented a litany of abuses.
The human rights and labor crimes, you're dealing with human trafficking, you're dealing with death by violence, wage theft, blocking of timely access to medical care, criminal level neglect in the form of beriberi, people that are essentially deprived of key nutrients to be able to survive, vessels that go dark and turn off their transponders and they disappear. All these are well-documented crimes as well that are in the marine space.
But the abuses aren't just confined to vessels. When the catch is brought ashore, it's processed, potentially by forced labour, according to the allegations from the Outlaw Ocean Project. Among those that work at the seafood factories are, they say, Uyghurs, the persecuted minority from Xinjiang. The Xinjiang government runs an official labour transfer programme, which human rights advocates say constitutes forced labour. A Sky News investigation I carried out in 2021 found Uyghur workers being advertised in batches of 50 to 100 people, and that they were being employed in Shandong, East China, in seafood processing plants. When I visited these factories, their managers denied the allegations, and they took down online articles showing evidence of Uyghur workers. But Outlaw Ocean's research seems to indicate that the use of Uyghur labour is ongoing. They identified several posts to Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, showing Uyghur workers at factories, as well as posts by companies and articles in local media, as recently as this year. Based on this and other data, they estimate at least 2,000 Uyghurs and other minorities from Xinjiang are employed in the Chinese seafood industry in Shandong at 9 companies. They include the company we investigated, Shandong Media Group, as well as another, the Chishan Group. As a result of Outlaw Ocean's investigation, several major seafood buyers in the US and Europe have already suspended shipments from a number of accused Chinese suppliers. In response, the China Aquatics Products Processing and Marketing Alliance said the accusations were completely fabricated and said it found no evidence of forced labour. They said workers of all ethnic groups enjoy a range of labour rights, including equal employment opportunities, the freedom to choose their profession, fair compensation, and access to vocational skills training. These principles also apply to employees in aquatic product processing enterprises. But 2 of the accused Chinese companies, Meijia and Chushan, appear to have business relationships with the UK too. It is a long and winding journey. Fish arrives in the province of Shandong, eastern China, much of it through the port of Ruzhou. That's where the processing and packaging takes place. Fish shipments bound for Europe usually pass through Rotterdam, where sometimes they're repackaged in different containers, which can add to the difficulty in tracking shipments. From there, the seafood shipments arrive at UK ports, such as Felixstowe. This is Britain's biggest and busiest container port, and one of the largest in Europe. It welcomes approximately 2,000 ships each year, including the largest container vessels afloat today. Felixstowe is the most important port for frozen seafood in the UK, but it's just another stopping off point in a supply chain that stretches thousands and thousands of miles from the waters of the Atlantic and the Pacific. That catch transferred, taken offshore, where it's processed, where it's packaged, it comes here, and then when it leaves here, it may be reprocessed, repackaged again. All of that makes it very hard to know whether the item of seafood, the pack that you buy, is tainted by forced labour. What we do know, though, is that one of the Chinese factories with Uyghur workers says that Iceland is a client, along with distributors Westbridge Foods and Fastnet Fish. And another company with Uyghur workers supplies Lion Seafoods, which in turn supplies British supermarkets, including Sainsbury's. We asked all those companies for comment. The 2 Chinese factories again denied that they used Uyghur workers. Fastnet Fish said it had terminated its relationship with a Chinese supplier as a result of the investigation. Iceland appeared to admit that Meijia had once been a supplier, but a spokesperson said, "We can confirm that Iceland is not, nor has not, for a significant period, received any products from such sites. It is Iceland's policy to be able to act responsibly in all commercial and trading activities to establish that the working conditions of people working for and within the supply chain meet relevant international standards." Iceland also said it was working with international auditing organisations on the relocation of Uyghur Muslims. Westbridge Foods did not respond to our request. Lion Seafood did not respond either, but its parent company had previously told the Outlaw Ocean Project that they were extremely concerned by the allegations. And a Sainsbury's spokesperson told Sky News, "All of our suppliers have to meet our high ethical and worker welfare standards. If we have any reason to believe there is a situation within our supply chains which is in breach of those standards, we take immediate action. We're working together with our suppliers and wider industry partners to understand the situation and take the most responsible and appropriate next steps."
because it's out of sight and out of mind. And a lot of that is happening over the horizon, quite literally. Nobody knows what's going on. So you then have the issue of enforcement, and there is a massive lacuna in the enforcement issue from coastal states in international waters. And without enforcement, you don't have a deterrent effect, and without deterrent effect, you have impunity.
In the hospital in Montevideo, Uruguay, Daniel was struggling. Apart from the beriberi, his body was covered in bruises. And on March the 7th, 2021, he died, alone, thousands of miles away from his family. His body was flown back to Indonesia, and he was taken to his home village of Batu Lungun. His mother fainted when she saw the coffin. The company which owns the Genfar 7 has denied any wrongdoing and said it had referred the matter to the China Overseas Fisheries Association for investigation. No criminal cases were brought against them or anyone else as a result of Daniel's death. Daniel was buried in a simple grave, alongside his father, who had died, unbeknownst to Daniel, while he was at sea. And he was just one of thousands of workers who go to sea as part of China's fishing fleet, looking for opportunity, but instead finding cruelty and impunity. And that impunity may even reach ashore, to where the seafood is processed, potentially by forced labour, according to Outlaw Ocean. It may be happening a world away. But these are our oceans too, and it is the food that we eat. If the catch is tainted, it affects us all. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.